brought to you by Gassam Cement and supported by 3FM 92.7 Accra.
Hello and welcome to Hot Issues, which is brought to you by Gassam Cement, the nation's builder. This week, we are taking a look at drugs, or if you like, narcotics. How can we control it or eliminate it? There have been all kinds of discussions about its legalization, some say decriminalization and whatever. Welcome to Hot Issues. Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues. And this week we are taking a look at narcotics, drugs. How do we control it? Is it possible to win the fight against narcotics? And how can we win that fight? The former Secretary General of the United Nations has actually called for the legalization of marijuana. There are others who are calling for the decriminalization of some kinds of drugs. In many countries, it is no longer an offense to have a reefer, to have some small quantity of marijuana for consumption and so on. Where is Ghana heading to in this war against narcotics? And we are privileged to have with us in the studio Mr. Akrasi Sarpong, Executive Secretary of the Narcotic Control Board. So you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you very much, Master.
Is the world winning the war against drugs?
In a generation, the world has not met to discuss the world drug problem. And between the 19th and the 21st of April this year, the United Nations had a General Assembly special session on the world drug problem. And one thing that emerged from that conference was that the world has recognized that there is a need to agree that addiction is a public health issue and not a criminal justice issue. And that is a great victory for those who believe that over-criminalization of drugs has actually led to human rights abuses, unnecessary billions of words put into a war, which ought not to be a war. I mean, fighting drugs is not a war. It's a big challenge. So the world has not won the debate yet, but the world is winning the debate. And I think that a number of countries are beginning to question where the world has stood all these years. If, for example, a number of countries have a quota every year to produce heroin for medical purposes, why don't we give a quota every year to countries to grow cannabis for industrial purposes or for some medical purposes? I mean, these debates are continuing. And so I think that the world is, the progressive voices for drug reform policy are winning. The challenge is that the challenge we face, and I'm sure that in the course of discussion we face, is that we think that politicians are not listening to law enforcement agents. And so politics shrouds the drug policy debate in that we can win because of votes. But that is not the issue. The issue is, why do we allow too much criminal money to thrive in the illegal drug market. And that is the problem. That really is the problem. And that is the greatest challenge. And until politicians in any country across the divide, in Ghana, MPP, NDC, and smaller parties, sit down and debate the issue. It's not a political issue. It is a political issue to the extent that it borders on policy and the body politic. But it is not a it is not an electable issue. It's an issue that we need to raise fundamental things about. And in Africa, the problem is really that there are too many competing demands on the national budget.
Now, sir, are you in a position to give us an idea about the magnitude of the problem? How big is the drug problem?
Well, let me just put the world drug problem in context, and then I'll come to marijuana is Ghana's biggest problem. So let's talk about marijuana. Mm-hmm. According to World Health Organization figures, which are a little higher than the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime figures, every year, about 183 million people between the age of 18 and 54 try marijuana once or habitually. Now that's a big number. 183 million people between the age of 15 and 54 try marijuana habitually or recreationally. Of course, that will also mean, when you say habitual, that also means problematic users.
Mm-hmm. Addiction?
Problematic users really means addiction, those who are addicted to it. Mm-hmm. In Ghana, statistics are very poor. But I can say that in every village, let us say there are 26,000 villages in Ghana. I'm basing that on polling stations, if you like, 26,000 communities. In every one of those communities, there is somebody who sells Indian. Even in Trasaku, there are people who sell Indian hemp. In other words, gated communities, there are people who sell Indian hemp in those communities. It means there are people who, so if on the average, in a year, on the average, if on a day, in those 26,000 communities, only 5 people smoke a day. That means you are dealing with 130 million people smoking a day and multiply that by 364 days, 365 days. So that gives you a figure that comes to about what? In the Ghanaian context, it will be something like 6 million, you know. Work it out on the West African basis. Countries that have porous borders, mm-hmm. and that tells you the magnitude. The danger is that the problem is that it's a commodity. Mm-hmm. I'm not an economist. I'm a pharmacist, a chemist, and yet basic economics tells you that when there's a commodity that can be sold, you need to be very careful. There's a market, and we have history on our side. Alcohol. Mm-hmm. There was a time when alcohol was banned.
Illicit.
It made illicit. And there was a huge market. US, Europe, Ghana, a huge market. Even today, in those countries where alcohol is banned, there's a huge underground market. And the point is, when there's an underground illegal market, that money doesn't go into the banking system. Mm-hmm. It undermines the economy, the structures of the economy, and people can use that money to corrupt others. There's also a large demand because it is considered as a recreational drug, you know. And I think that we need to also look at a little bit of a history. Marijuana's history in Ghana is a drug of resistance, of defiance. The soldiers of the First World War went and saw people smoking it. They used it during the war recreationally. They came back and they continued with it. And that was not just Ghanaian soldiers. This is the Royal West African Frontier Force. So the drugs came back and it went all over the place. Ghanaian soldiers who were in also in East Africa, and what's it called, Ethiopia and others. They also encountered marijuana. So what is important is that we need to understand. And then also when we come back here, historically we've called it Abonsam Tower. As if cigarettes itself is Nyami Tower. And I think that also the narrative and the religio nomenclatures we give to it creates a little bit of a problem, you know. What people also do not recognize is that marijuana is one of the drugs which doctors and social workers will tell you is used recreationally by a lot of middle class people who are not criminals. You know, so increasingly you go to universities, you go to the what's it called? You go to the barracks, Atemuda, Jordan, Anda. These are things that are in the barracks. I'm not saying that this is good. These things are good, but I'm saying that the pervasiveness, we need to address it very critically, because you may come out of the policy and even the policeman or soldier who say, "Oh, these guys, they don't understand the issues." This one is not a big deal. What our problem is the illegal, illicit market. And then you can then begin to understand people like Dr. Kofi Annan, who calls for legalization. I don't agree with legalization. I have been calling for decriminalization. And in the course of this debate, I'll explain. But that even the calling for decriminalization, legalization, and that tells you that it's an ongoing problem. If there was no problem, it will not bring out so much deep emotions when it comes to these things. Religious emotions, social emotions, class emotions, and we need to look and consider these things very critically. But I must say that, like I said, if we take this country as 26,000, every day somebody is smoking marijuana. It is pervasive. Every day somebody is smoking marijuana in each of these communities. And I'm even saying that the so-called gated communities like Tlasako, there are people who smoke and who drink and who sell marijuana.
Now, sir, what's the difference between legalization and decriminalization?
Okay, thank you very much. Both of them fall into the set of legal regulation. As a pharmacist, I know that you cannot walk into a pharmacy, my pharmacy, and tell me you want to buy azithromycin. That is an antibiotic. Or a very easy one would be ampicillin or amoxicillin. You need a prescription. In fact, codeine, which we normally take as codeine, is a narcotic and it's a controlled substance in the law books. So you really need a prescription. And that is what we call legal regulation. Take cigarettes. You take a packet of cigarette, they write on it, cigarette smoking can be dangerous to your health. Alcohol adverts, not for children under the age of 8, not for persons under the age of 18. These are what we call legal regulations. So in drug reform discourse, it is important to discuss this very critically, because when we say legalization in drug reform discourse or drug policy discourse, we actually mean we have to have a wide range of legal regulations about the cultivation, the processing, the wholesaling, the retailing, and the use. And when they say use, not only that, post-use treatment and rehabilitation. That whole gamut. So if somebody becomes an addict, what do you do to the person? When we talk about decriminalization, all we are saying is that leave the laws on the law books. But when somebody has a small amount for personal use, possession for personal use, and it is abundantly clear that he was caught with one wrapper, you don't put that person in jail, because it's a complete waste of time, a waste of resources. You know, so
But isn't that also regulation? Isn't that also about certain rules?
yeah, I'm coming to that.
Yeah.
That's also about regulation. That is really, but the point about decriminalization is that we are talking about possession for small purposes. So really, decriminalization can become one of the loose ends of legalization. One of the loose ends of legalization. But really, the term legalization means that take away all the restrictions from the law books and pass laws that will say, look, if you want to grow, come and register. If you want to grow, it's possible that if you want a seed, come and take the seed from Narcotics Control Board or some marketing company, so that it can be regulated, it can be tracked. You know, so that the levels of, say, THC is a psychotropic, psychoactive substance in that people rarely smoke marijuana for. You know, tetrahydrocannabinol. If you can then regulate and control the amounts, it's a dream, because people can decide that they're going to grow this thing in the rooftops and other things, rather than, you know, in open. But it can be regulated, and then the science tells us that we can have bio-trackers. We can know who has bought from where. That is the type of regulation we are talking about. But for decriminalization, we are talking about not only that, but when people have more than what you are talking about, maybe 10, and it's clear that they are distributing, then there are administrative sanctions, not criminal sanctions. That is what we mean don't criminalize certain aspects of possession and use. Because imagine somebody goes to court today and goes to the Supreme Court for interpretation about his human rights and says, look, Supreme Court, I want you guys to decide between cigarette smoking, one stick of cigarettes, and a small joint of marijuana. It's my right. I want to smoke marijuana in my room. Why is marijuana illegal, but cigarette smoking not illegal? The consequences are the same. You are harming your lungs. So we're saying, let us look through these things and the health consequences and ask ourselves, alcohol, cigarettes, and marijuana, which is more dangerous? And the debate, for those of us who call for things like decriminalization, our debate is that, look, alcohol is more harmful. Cigarette smoking is more harmful. You know. And so cocaine and heroin that are on that end, which are more dangerous than, that's more potent than marijuana, let us put them on the law books. And punish for possession. But when you talk of decriminalization, you're also talking about value for money, criminal justice interventions. You're looking for the guys who are cultivating big scale, because you want to end the supply. You don't wait, you have to, if you don't grab those who are supplying and you grab those who are at the retail end, I think you're not being fair to them, because for them, it's about demand. They have smoked, they need it for recreation. So the people who are growing it are the ones that we are dealing with. And it is in this regard that yesterday's program came up, where the the US Embassy, as part of Ghana's National Integrated Program, which is a 5-year transnational program, transnational organized crime, or program to fight transnational organized crime in Ghana, the US government has contributed $1 million to the drug law enforcement units of the Ghana Police Service to beef up their capacity so that we can deal more effectively with marijuana, the cultivation and its trafficking.
Now, are we saying that if we decriminalize marijuana or its consumption, those who produce it can still face criminal sanction? And those who distribute it can still face criminal sanction?
That is what it means.
Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues. And we are looking at drugs, narcotics generally, and focusing attention on marijuana. You do know that some very prominent people, including the former Secretary General of the United Nations, Dr. Kofi Annan, have called for the legalization, or some say decriminalization, of marijuana. What are the full implications? Can it help us in our fight against drugs and so on? And we are particularly privileged to have with us in the studio today Mr. Yao Akrasi Sarpong, Executive Secretary of the Narcotic Control Board. Now, sir, Europe, some countries in Europe have sort of decriminalized the use of marijuana. Are you familiar with that experience?
Yeah, there are again in the drug policy discourse, there are large, there are many examples, and it's very reassuring, you know, that even first world countries, developed countries, are pushing, are practicing these things. But we need to recognize that each country has to look at its own situation, because Portugal is different. Portugal has decriminalized even cocaine, you know, and they have clubs where people are allowed to smoke these things. I mean, Netherlands, it's going through a cycle. The Netherlands, over say a period of 10 years, they'll liberalize, then they'll tighten it up again. You know, because Netherlands in particular, because once they liberalize, many other people from other countries, they didn't need visas, because they are European citizens. They could just drive there, smoke, and it had its consequences. So it is important to say that the liberalization of possession and use, you see, all these things are about the possession and use for recreation, you know. Now, people have argued that if we do the same in Ghana, the advanced countries, they have extensive and well laid out health services and rehabilitation centers. But it's like the egg and the chicken. Do you wait until you have all these things while the crime continues and people are getting addicted? Or do you introduce something and monitor its progress? I think it's better to introduce. In America, it's a very interesting phenomenon in America. I mean, America has a comfort of being a federal state. Because at the federal level, it is illegal to possess marijuana. Of course, if marijuana, then all other drugs. At certain state levels, it is not illegal. Some have decriminalized, some have legalized it. The federalists argue that, look, even those in the states where it's liberalized, when you take that money, because it's illegal at the federal level, and because the banking system is controlled by the federal laws, you cannot channel that money into the banking sector. So they call it the Brownian flexibility theory, where on the one hand, at the federalist or at the federal level, it is illegal. At the other level in the state, Uruguay is completely legalized. And again, Uruguay may have a particular history. You know, you have to also look at the history of it. I mean, the political economy of it is such that then that is extremely important. That people ought to discuss the political economy of drugs, just like they discuss the political economy of any other commodity. Because Uruguay has a special case, because they are the one state in Latin America that is more European than any other states. There, the others have native people, native Indians, blacks, and other things. But here you have virtually a 99% European history. So their culture is more. I mean, it's a little more. The level of education, the level of liberalization is a little higher. And there were in the other Latin American countries, criminal groups have taken over. And in those Latin American countries, for example, coca is how do you put it? It's a cultural right. The coca leaves is a cultural right. Criminal persons have converted the coca leaf thing into an industry of cocaine. I think we need to start with marijuana. We need to regulate it properly. We need to encourage civil society organizations to get into demand reduction and harm reduction. In the final analysis, if you want people to stop marijuana, it is not pontificating. It is a demand, reducing the demand. There are mechanisms, measures, programs to reduce the demand. For example, there's a concept in the US which talks about community level empowerment. You empower the community, and we've had people come from the US to train civil society organizations and narcotic control board officials to learn how to empower communities, to identify where the farms are, to discourage from planting and smoking, and to ensure that there's more of prevention than criminal justice.
So you speak about the need to have rehabilitation centers and so on. Some speak about that. Doesn't that suggest a degenerative medical effect? I think we're going to have rehabilitation centers and so on. It suggests that it does something negative to the human being medically, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, you know, indeed, it has neurotic effects, neurological effects, let me put it. It works on the central nervous system. And every human being is different. Just like we say that cigarette smoking, even passive smokers are inhaling. So it has its degenerative effect. So we need to understand that because it is not, because the substance THC is not something that is naturally in our bodies, and we ingest it from outside, it will definitely interact with our body somehow. So it does have consequences. But you know, if it has consequences, it doesn't matter, or let me put it, it doesn't mean because it has its consequences, people don't take them. It is their right. It is people's right, once they taste it for the first time, to smoke it. We are not saying that they ought to smoke it, but I'm saying it is their human right to decide what to do with their bodies. So if they end up, if you ban it, and yet they still grow it, and they smoke it, there are consequences. And we need to recognize, it is the fact that even in drug policy discourse, we agree that there ought to be rehabilitation centers, means that people get addicted to these things. And once they get addicted to substances, we need to clearly find out the medical response. And I think that is an issue. People get addicted to drinking. People get addicted to smoking. People get addicted to marijuana. But let me stress here again that there are several products that are on the internet that are more dangerous and more potent than heroin, cocaine, and marijuana.
Shouldn't we have an attitude of banning all of them rather than accepting some? Yeah, they are more dangerous products. Why don't you ban all dangerous products?
Yeah, but the thing is that I agree. Well, that is one position to take. But you know, that is one position to take. But we need to be realistic. I'm a chemist, and if I apply my synthetic organic methods, I can produce anything in the lab. If I produce something tomorrow in my lab, you haven't tested it, so you can't ban it. You haven't tested it. But it may be more potent. That is why it's pretty important to say that, look, if you are not careful, then the children are going to go on the internet and buy more potent things.
A lot of the children are now sniffing glue.
Because?
And I understand that glue and petrol sniffing is far more dangerous than cocaine.
Well, I don't know about cocaine, but than marijuana, clearly. Because what you are inhaling, the petrochemicals you are inhaling into your lungs, the hydrocarbons, can just destroy your lungs forever, you know. So that is a lesson, or that is something that we need to take advantage of. Sniffing glue, inhaling petrol, there's no law against it. So we need to look at human behavior and see the approach in people changing their mental states to gain states of euphoria and happiness. It's not legislated against. It's about education and ensuring that the demand for these things are brought lower. And one of the problems why a lot of children go into drugs is that for the sons, they need father figures. And many times their fathers are not around. It's about our present social life. You know, the fathers are not around. So even family get together. We are not that old, but when we were children, in the evenings, our grandfathers and grandmothers will call us around. And they will be telling us stories, you know. And those things are lacking today. So you get a lot of peer pressure today. A young boy gets up in the morning and all he has to deal with are his friends. He's not dealing with his parents. A driver drops him in school. They pick the child up at 5 p.m. So between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., 5 days a week, he's exposed to. And if you have a very liberal home where the father is smoking and the children see their father smoking, they can tell the other two, look, maybe my father smokes. And then there's nothing wrong with smoking. Why don't you take a try? And there's certain people, once they try it, our bodies are different. The addictive nature will affect one person and will not affect others. When we were in school, we saw a lot of people who were smoking cigarettes, drinking, smoking marijuana. When we left school, some of them continued to smoke it. Post-university. Some of them stopped. They don't drink at all. Some of them stop smoking. Or some of them smoke only occasionally. So people's attitude and responses to these substances. We in NACOP believe that we need to look at the drug policy approach has to be not just narcotics. We have to change the name to alcohol, tobacco, and other drugs. Now, if we label it like this, people will understand that narcotic drugs is at the tail end. It's alcohol first, which is problematic, tobacco, but because of the alcohol and tobacco lobby and the profits, centered not in Africa, centered in the whole, the capitalist economic system. There's a big lobby for it. And that same lobby is saying that you should ban marijuana rather than tobacco. But Massa, I can tell you that there are people who smoke 10 sticks of cigarettes a day. That amount of cigarettes, nobody can smoke 10 rolls of marijuana in a day. You just go off. So it is important for people to weigh the medical and public health consequences. This is my view.
Now, sir, you are many things. Chemist.
A chemist.
Pharmacist.
A pharmacist.
And I understand that you are quite good at mathematics also.
Well, I think I'm fairly good.
And then now you are into law. Given all of this background and so on, do you believe that the evidence that marijuana has some beneficial medical value is worth considering at all?
Oh yes, it is worth considering. I mean, if the evidence for medical marijuana, they call it, is so huge in the US and in Australia, you cannot sweep it under the carpet. I mean, these are two centers of credible science. Two centers of credible science. So, and they will be growing, I mean, they will be growing these things there because they have climates that can accommodate it. But maybe Europe will not, because Europe is virtually, I mean, you hardly ever get marijuana in the fields. So, first of all, in marijuana, or in cannabis, there are several products called cannabinoids. The most psychoactive of them is what is called delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol. So when we say that cannabis has medicinal uses, it may be cannabis without, because there are cannabinoids. I mean, there are some cannabinoids that are used In the in Netherlands, they produce them that if you have a cold, you sniff. But that has no THC in it. So it is worth considering. That's why I said that we need to include it in the corpus of
it is possible to cultivate and distribute marijuana which does not have a psychotic effect.
No. Once it is called cannabis sativa or cannabis indica, then it will have a certain percentage of THC. But that is what we ought to be doing in Ghana. You see, we ought to be doing research which reduces the amount of THC, so that when you have that thing there, when you have medicinal cannabis, it is less of THC. Let me give you another instance.
So at least it is possible to have.
It is possible to have cannabis with
very little AC.
THC, yes, very, very little. But let me also tell you this: look, our women, very, 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 very ingenious. They take the cannabis seeds. Now, first of all, in plant biology, what you call botany, seeds for every plant always contain oil, because they can be reserved as food for the next generation. Now, our women take the seeds, they fry the seeds, they grind them, and they make oil out of it. And our wives and sisters and mothers go and they tell them, Ope, do you want cannabis cream for your hair? It will help you grow. Or do you want something else?
Well, they sell it in the shops.
First of all, I'm giving the
marijuana hair cream is sold in the shops.
I'm even telling you the local one. But then at the same time...
Oh, locally in Accra?
Locally. Then we, as a country, we allow people to import hemp hair creams and sell them in shops. What are we telling our people? What are we telling our people? What is the economics of it? We allow people to import.
But sir, if you put it in your hair,
yes,
does it have the same effect as smoking it?
No,
it
no.
may not.
All I'm saying is that if somebody can make the oil, the hair cream, using the same plant outside your country, then look at ways and means of creating an industry, local industry, in the rural economy, where they can make the cream. I'll give you another instance.
I use Kuza hair cream.
Okay.
Kuza hair cream is marijuana.
But somebody brings it in.
It's sold everywhere.
Yeah, do they have
in
a
all
license?
the cosmetic shops.
Yeah, so for me, we are. It means therefore that we have virtually decriminalized its use. Now I'm saying that if we are doing that type for middle class sellers, we shouldn't deal with a rural economy like that. We shouldn't be. We should. I mean, the last time, how do I put it? We over sensationalize when we see our local people without training trying to make the best out of we. Oh, we biscuits. I'm not saying that we biscuits are good, cannabis biscuits, but did we test them? Did they have cannabis in them? Did they have THC in them? People are selling biscuit and the recipes is on the net. I'm saying that these things, we have to be very careful about the rural economy and its intervention. Because otherwise, you will have a situation where, because as we speak, people are not growing pepper and people are not growing tomatoes. They make more money from growing Indian hemp. Why? Because people come all the way from Nigeria, all the way from the Gambia, to come and buy Ghana's wheat. That is a West African economy. I'm not saying encourage it, but I'm saying that's the reality. So we, together with the police, continue to identify, continue to nip out large-scale farms. But we need to find out whether that is the only response. And we are saying that there are other responses. Let me give you another instance. In Britain.
We'll come to the other instance. Hello and welcome back to Hot Issues. And we are dealing with an issue which is very, very hot. We are talking generally about marijuana and how to deal with its consumption, production, and so on. And there have been calls for its legalization. There have been calls for its decriminalization. I mean, I remember that as a little boy in secondary school, there was a professor of psychology in the University of Ghana, Professor Fishin.
Fission, yes.
who continuously advocated the legalization of marijuana.
Psychology department.
Yeah, psychology department. Now we've come this far, and even the former Secretary General of the United Nations has joined the call. Now, sir, you wanted to give another example. What is the other example you wanted
The example is that in Europe, there is a drug called durobinol. It is produced and sold in the pharmacies. Durobinol is 100% THC. It's sold as a pharmaceutical. Now, these things people ought to know. It is sold as a pharmaceutical because it has medical uses. It is regulated. You know, there are people who, I know of a few, one or two doctors, very, very few, one or two doctors, who discuss with their patients who have epilepsy the possibility of trying a smoke of marijuana on their own time. Both doctors say their patients have consistently refused it, but they continue to engage them because they know that it can calm them down. I mean, I'm not prescribing this. These are doctor friends of mine, you know, who don't want to be named. Because, I mean, some of them think that, you know, Master and myself can talk, but they want to keep their integrity and, you know, whatever intact. But this is the point I'm talking. Durobinol. I remember that I think 2 or 3 years ago, I think 3 years ago, we went to the Commission on Narcotic Drugs, and a few countries wanted it to be brought from a certain schedule. In other words, to be made more lax for its sale. And Ghana and several other countries said no. If you are if you say that cannabis, why is cannabis banned? Or why is cannabis regulated on the international treaties? Because of this substance. So why is it that this substance is a chemical now, not in the plant, and yet you want it deregulated, or if like decommissioned, brought a little more lax, made a little more lax for its sale? So those are the type of things I'm talking about. And I personally believe that if our laws must clearly determine what type of cannabis, because we have industrial cannabis. Here it is all cannabis. The schedule say cannabis. We need to be clear in our minds also that there is industrial cannabis, which we can use to make jute bags, or we can use to make bags. We can use to make ropes. It's on the net. And we need to encourage our people that there are alternatives to cannabis, indica, and sativa. There are alternatives to the smoking. I'll give you another instance. When we arrest cannabis, we go to court and the court says, say a truckload, 5 tons. They say, go and burn it. That is the order of the court. I'm looking for a situation where I will consult my seniors at the Attorney General's Department and say, let's go back to court and say, look, burning so much marijuana in the open is against environmental policy. So what is the response? My response is that the Ghana government must invest in a briquet making machine. Cannabis arrested is organic material. Put it in the briquet machine and let it convert the cannabis into briquet and give that briquet to rural people to use as charcoal. 5 cubic centimeters of briquet can burn for 1 week. A log of wood, firewood, will burn in 1 day. So what have we done? So we need to think outside the box. And all these things, we need to give that, we need to challenge CSR to bring out the various options so that as a country, we make the maximum use of.
Now, sir, don't you think that the pseudo-moralist attitude can affect this attempt at reform?
Yeah, it does.
Churches, politicians, and so on.
Yeah, it does.
There's certain pseudo-moralist,
It
posturing.
does. Well, first of all, I in my own way, I try to do a lot of research, and I've realized that virtually all our politicians are cowards. They don't talk about these. When I say cowards, not about, but the issues like this, they are afraid to talk about it because of votes, because of the way they'll be called.
Are they just cowards or sometimes hypocrites? Some of them consume the substance and still pretend that they engage in a fight against it.
Well, I won't go there because, now I don't want people to start saying, prove this and prove that. But, my own liberal attitude to these things is that when I know, if I know an MP smokes, I try to engage the MP into saying that, look, you should be helping this debate. Or if I know he has smoked before, help this debate. But they don't want to talk about it. And the other thing I've said is that, look, I haven't seen a single member of parliament who has put up a single billboard. Drug trafficking and cultivation is bad. But in every constituency, the MPs know in every constituency, in every town, in every constituency, there are weed pushers. People are smoking weed.
No, they go to them to canvass for their votes, don't they?
So all I'm saying is that the type of reform we are talking about suits they themselves. Because, you see, in those rural economies, if they don't articulate the issues properly, the pseudo-moralists will be calling those guys names. And invariably, those people are daring and they are anti-institution, the anti-authority or authority. And it's a very dangerous thing. And somebody with my intelligence background, I try to observe changing trends and how they can affect tomorrow. Many people who are mobilized for large-scale demonstrations on the spur of the moment, particularly in politics, alcohol and marijuana. And that itself can be dangerous. I mean, if any politician will use alcohol and marijuana, or not necessarily use them, but know people who will normally, for being daring, go and smoke marijuana and drink Akrasi on top, or go and take Atamuda or Jordan or under, that is a very dangerous situation. So it is. I would like to appeal to politicians. Let's talk the issues. Let's talk the issues. Let's talk the issues. Because in this country, we have seen politics. I don't want to attach any political party, but we have seen a politician of a ruling party arrested for drugs before. It tells you that, what it tells you is that, and then when somebody is arrested, another MP stands on a radio station to accuse another political party that, even when at the last election, that person gave bicycles or something. Now, all that it means is that people know people involved in drugs, whose money, one way or the other, helps in somebody's campaign. Now, that is very dangerous. And we need to look at it critically and approach it well. Because I think that those who have that type of money, it is illegal. I mean, it is illicit money that we don't need to allow them to make. We can channel that money into rural economy. That helps solve a lot of problems.
Now, sir, why does your board, Narcotic Control Board, want to become Narcotic Control Commission? Would that make any difference?
I think that, again, to be very fair to the political divide, and that really is what that I'm happy about. You see, it is a view that emerged in the latter part of 1999, 2000. Just at the tail end of Jerry Rawlings' term as president. And people called for the board to be convened to a commission. In the MPP period, the debate continued. Workshops were held. And there was no, if like a commitment for discussion, but no commitment to action. In the 2004 and 2008, I remember more clearly, 2008 manifesto of the NDC took up that theme, which had been there from 99 on through the Kufuor era to 2008, and said, look, we will convert NACOP into a commission. I think that initially the people were thinking about something like NCCE or Electoral Commission. And it was to make it autonomous, it will look for its own resources, and invariably it will be such that its presence will be everywhere, so that even if the police or customs arrest something, they will refer it to NACOP. So it is going to make the commission more effective, more autonomous. The law is very clear. It will give it greater powers. At the moment, its presence is not felt all over the country. The law will make sure that its presence is felt all over the country. We are thinking about arming our officials, our officers. So those are the things, and we have a very experienced person experienced person to be the chairman of the first commission, board of the commission, Mr. William K. Abua, who has been Commissioner CID before, Director of Immigration, Minister for the Interior, National Security Advisor. So we are hoping that the formative years he will bring his experience to bear. My view also is that on the new board, the president may, well, either you give, the president has the discretion, prerogative to, I think, appoint 2 persons. What I would like to see is that in the commission itself, statutorily, we'll put it there. The Parliamentary Select Committee on Defense and Interior, the ranking member and the chairperson have to be on it. You commit. And I think, if I had my way, I would think that the vice chairman of the board must be the ranking member. Just like PAC. The chairman of PAC is always on the, we need to commit our political resources for national cohesion when it comes to things like drugs. I think that's very, very important.
So when are you going to become the commission, or have you become the commission?
No. From the 7th, I've been discussing with the Parliamentary Select Committee and on Defense and Interior, and I must again admit that even the MPP guys on the, or shall I say even, it is. Maybe the word even is not right, but
well,
the
all
NDC, the NDC and the MPP, all the parties on the commission, they're all eager to make sure that this is done, and they are all telling me, push. So I've been only yesterday I met the chairman, Honorable Fritz Baffo, and he did indicate that they have given us a date. I think it is the 14th through the 19th of June when we will sit down and finish the thing. And then, so I'm hoping that by the time Parliament rises, they would have, and it's on their agenda. By the time Parliament rises, they would have pushed through the bill. So hopefully by the beginning of September, will be a commission.
So thank you very much for coming. Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
Well, viewers, this has been Hot Issues, which has been brought to you by Gassen Cement, the nation's builder. We have tried to explain all the nuances and so on, and hope that all of us have gained a thing or two about marijuana and the debate about whether it should be decriminalized, legalized, and so on. Well, this is coming to you from TV3, the best in the nation. So please stay with us until we meet again.
Brought to you by Gassam Cement and supported by 3FM 92.7 Accra.